why am I working on this at all? Man, love that. Don't know what I do with it, but I do love it. We will see what this turns into in the next podcast. I need to make that into something right now.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another podcast episode today, especially after a week of doing something a little bit different. If you haven't seen it already, last Saturday, in lieu of a standard podcast episode, I tried something a little bit different, as I like to do. And I actually did a video about knitting your own Free People sweaters, kind of doing a price breakdown of what it would really cost to sort of recreate the sweaters that you could find at the store, as well as just a little pattern roundup of some Free People vibed looks. And I have to just say a huge thank you to everyone who has watched that video. I'm so glad that you guys enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun putting it together, and I've been keeping up with the comments, so I'm hearing all of your recommendations for future stores to do the same thing for. So if you haven't seen that video, please do go check it out and let me know what store you'd like me to do next, and I'll get working on the next one soon. For today, we have a normal podcast episode, and it's been a couple of weeks since I filmed one, so I do have quite a bit to chat about. Of course, what I'm wearing today, which is one of two finished objects. The second finished object you have not seen before, and then I'll be discussing two different whips as well as some acquisitions. So I do think we should go ahead and just dive on in. Starting with what I'm wearing today, this is my completed Cordelia top by Witchery Design, which I have knit up out of Drops Belle in the colorways Mint Cream and Black. And this top I have knit to match the skirt that is of the same name, the Cordelia skirt, which I actually knit up last year. And I honestly, for a second there, I kind of forgot that that was the point, that I was indeed knitting up a matching set, because the skirt had been tucked away. I just hadn't worn it yet. And to be honest, I hadn't finished blocking it after making the final adjustments that I had when I knitted up last year. And it still doesn't have the ends woven in. So I blocked it at the same time as this one, and it still just needs those last couple of ends woven in. So if I get around to that in the next day or two, then I will try to take some photos before this podcast episode goes up so that I will put them in here if I've done that. And if not, I will pop them up on my Instagram sometime in the next week or so, so you guys can see the full set together. I still have yet to try it on all together myself, so that's my bad. I literally forgot that the skirt existed. But as for the top, this was knit from the bottom up, and you can see, I'm sure, that obviously it's striped, but the really, I think, lovely detail of this set is that worked within these black stripes, there's just a single purl row, and it really creates for this beautiful dimensional texture, which I just think lends itself to looking a little bit more luxury and just a little bit more interest. It's just more visually interesting than it would be if it was all over stockinette. Now, being that this was worked from the bottom up, basically you cast on and work to that underarm and then kind of work all of this business. The modification that I had made to the beginning of this, which is just my sort of standard by now for bottom up garments, is that I cast on with a provisional cast on and then returned to that provisional cast on later so that I could knit my ribbing basically from the top down and just do a tubular bind off. I just like the way that that looks. It's a little bit easier for me. And then also, should I need to add more length in that ribbing or something, it's just so much easier. There's a little bit more control. So I always would recommend that for a bottom up garment. And actually, maybe that's going to help me out later on. I'll get to that in a second. But once I got to this underarm, I knit all of this business. And then this just gets a little bit tricky because you are sort of trusting your row gauge and the pattern and all of that to make sure that the dimensions of even the underarm to the shoulder and then the depth of the neckline, you really do have to trust the process that that's all going to work out. And I think that this is one of these situations where I'm going to call this particular finished garment good enough. However, I am still on the lookout for a similar style of tank top that has a high crew neck and the thicker sleeve as this one has, but that's just knit from the top down. It doesn't need to be in the same yarn combination. I think that this gets the job done to finish this set, and this top will work in seamlessly with my little capsule wardrobe that I talk about all the time. So I'm very satisfied with that. However, I don't feel I'm satisfied as far as having a top that is as high a neck as I want it to be. And then I do wish that this was just a little bit longer. Again, this one I'm calling good enough. I think it's going to work just fine in the way that I plan to wear it. But as far as wearing it in a more versatile way, I wish that this top did have a little bit more length to it. And so if I find that I'm really enjoying wearing this, but that the length starts to inhibit me from pairing it with certain pants or things that I would have thought I'd pair it with, I might just undo that bind off that I had done, the Italian tubular bind off, and try and extend this a little bit. Of course, then I'll also have that button band kind of playing into that situation. So I don't know exactly how that would play out, but regardless, I think that I could justify having two fairly similar garments in my wardrobe, and one that's just a little bit more cropped and one that's a little bit longer. So I have no issue with that. I love this style of button up top. Now, speaking of the button up top, you can see here that I have these adorable little antique aged brass buttons on it, and I am thrilled with this button choice. I think that it's the perfect button for this style of top. I love the shank style button and how that metal just kind of gives it something a little bit more polished and elevates it to something slightly more formal than casual. Obviously, it's not a formal top by any means, but I just think that that makes it a little more special. So once you finish this whole upper arm business and you seam at the shoulders, you of course come around and pick up stitches to knit the hem on the shoulders. And that's just the other modification I've made, is anywhere I've done an edge, I've finished with the Italian tubular sewn bind off. So that meant I had to just knit one additional row on all of my hem edges. And honestly, I think that's a great idea because they were pretty narrow to begin with. So I'm very happy with what that's looking like. You come back then and do the neckline, and then you go in and do the button band, in which you're also utilizing some yarn overs to make the button holes. And I knew from the beginning that I was going to go through that process, but then I was definitely also going to tack mine down. So once this was all blocked and done, I went ahead and stitched the very outermost edge of the button band down to the front of the top, and I literally just tacked it as I went, using the mint cream drops bell to make sure you wouldn't see that stitch. So the backside of it is maybe not the prettiest, but it totally gets the job done. And in doing so, I did just leave the top button and the bottom button free because I kind of like that look then of when you first look at this, you might not assume it's sewn down because you can kind of see that the top button is a little standalone guy. Also, these buttons are like maybe a little snug for this top. But yeah, you can just see that it could open if I needed it to. And then the bottom button is the same because I do tend to wear a top like this with the bottom of it unbuttoned. That's just the way that I prefer to sort of style it. But other than that, the rest of the button band is sewn down. So I sewed on the... Let me find my buttonhole again. I sewed on the top and bottom buttons. I tacked down the rest of the button band. And then from there, rather than sewing on individually the, I think, 14 buttons I have across here, I actually just sort of inserted the shank of the button through the buttonhole, tacked it down on the back of the fabric, and then carried that yarn up to the next one and did the same. I did that across 2 or 3 buttons. tied a knot, cut the yarn, and did it again. And it made this process so simple. And now I never have to worry about this opening up or anything like that. But because I have the buttonholes there, I do always have the option to turn this into a little bit more of a button down top if that suits me better at some point or another. But regardless, I'm very happy with this. Like I said, I may be satisfied about an 8 out of 10 on this project, but that 2 out of 10 isn't enough for me to remake it or fix it unless I find after I'm wearing it a little bit, it causes me issues. So I'm happy to wait a little and see. It's totally wearable as is, and I think it's super cute, even with just the jeans I have on today. Let me give you the quick rundown of the finished object stats, and we'll close this one up. So as I said, this is the Cordelia top by Witchery Design. This pattern costs about $9.29. And this was in my library, which also means that this is a great contender for 2025 from the Vault, which is the very casual year-long knit-along that I've been running this year. Just encouraging you to use what you got, be that your patterns, yarn and stash, books that you have on the shelves, anything that you knit out of stash or out of your library or out of your vault. You could use hashtag 2025 from the vault to enter to win prizes at the end of the year and anytime that we do a random giveaway in between. The yarn is Drop Spell in the colorways Mint Cream and Black, and that yarn was also in Stash. At full price, this yarn is about $2.50 per ball, and I got it on sale at $2.25 per ball. And it looks like I used about 5 balls total to make this project, which also is like nothing as they are little 50-gram balls. So a very nice stash busting project if you have the yarn for it. So that means that had I paid full price for the yarn, I would have spent about $12.50 on the yarn, but at the sale price, I spent about $11.25 with the additional expenses of the buttons, which we're calling that about $2. My full price project total, so had I bought the yarn at full price plus the pattern, the additional expenses, it would be about $23.79, but my personal total spent was $22.54. That's all for a project that wound up being on my needles from cast on to buttons sewn on and ends woven in. It was 36 days, which means that my cost per day to knit this garment was about 63 cents. And I'm very satisfied with that number. So I think that's everything I have to say about this Cordelia top. I will say as far as recommending this pattern to a friend, if you intend to knit the whole set, I would say go for it. There's nothing wrong with the pattern. It's just that I found it to be very bare bones. And like I said, with that bottom up construction, if you're simply looking for a top in this style, I would just recommend finding something else that's knit from the top down. And I'll even be on the lookout for something like that because I do want to make a second top that is actually in that style. And otherwise, I think that's everything I have to say about my Cordelia top. Okay, second finished object here is, like I said, something you guys have not seen yet, though if you have a particularly good memory, you might remember that I mentioned wanting to knit this up for a friend's wedding, and that is a second lemon pouch by Yoon Jeong. Now, I did also tell you guys that I was going to make it in a huge version, and I was not kidding. So take a look at this thing. Oh my gosh. It's definitely a little bit wonky. There's nothing in it right now, and it has just kind of been sitting down since the wedding. So let me try to kind of push out all of the lemony bits. But I knit up one of these lemon pouches for the same friend. Her new last name is Lemon, and for her bridal shower, I made her a little emergency kit and made it out of the lemon pouch itself and just stuffed it with little things that she could need. I actually said, lemony thing you may need to have the very zest day ever because I'm cheesy like that. So I knit one up in the following the pattern for real, and then I wanted to make a second version because I had this t-shirt yarn kicking around. So this has absolutely turned into a mess. I need to cake this up before I put it back into my stash. This was some thrifted t-shirt yarn that I just thought would make for a really fun, ginormous lemon. And then I wound up just deciding to give it a little bit more texture. I held it with a strand of this random chenille yarn that I had also thrifted. So those are both thrifted yarns, and I'm glad I did. I think it made it look particularly lemony. It kind of took it from being too pastel to, it gave it a little lemon zest, if you will, and I love that. And I actually also adore the way that I had knit up the little leaf, which was using this Rico Creative Melange Chunky, which was also a thrifted yarn. And I do believe that this is a merino acrylic blend, but it's super fun because it is variegated. And so it just made for this really fun little leaf. I do wish that it started with the lighter color on the tip and then the darker color at the base, but obviously I did not care that much to reconfigure it or anything. You start this project by knitting up the leaf itself, and it's a little tricky. I have notes on my Ravelry page for the original lemon that I had knit on how I think you should go about knitting that leaf, because I tried about 10 times before I could understand what was actually happening. So if you're planning to knit this up, which I do recommend, it's a super sweet little pattern. It's very quick to knit. I would definitely go check out those notes. It's a little bit finicky, and I think that I have solved the problem there. But you start with the leaf, which is basically 2 layers. And then when you get to the end, you wind up knitting this funny little I-cord stem. And then you go ahead, you go ahead then and just knit the rest of the I-cord. Then you cast on the rest of the lemon using a provisional cast on, and you essentially knit ribbing to twice the height of this little section of the drawstring, and then sew it down on itself with the I-cord sandwiched in between so that it becomes this drawstring bag. And from there you increase and then decrease to create this lemon shape. Now, I gotta tell you guys, knitting with this yarn was kind of a nightmare, and I don't know if I'd ever do it again. I think I just didn't have the appropriate size needles for this. I almost gave up after the ribbing because that was particularly difficult. But then once I got to the body, I kind of found a better way to do it. So I was using magic loop, and I'm gonna grab the needle I actually was using because I don't remember what size it was. Okay, so here's the actual needle. I have yet to take them off of the cords. This is what I was using. So in my left hand, I was using an 8mm needle, and in my right hand, I was using a 10mm needle. And I was doing this on magic loop with this super long cable. And you might even be able to tell that my cable has now seen better days. The amount of tension I was putting on this cable, just wrestling and wrangling these giant stitches, was honestly, it was a lot. It was a very intense project. I'll also say that for the most part, once I got past the leaf, I was referencing the pattern, but more so just for the idea of what was going on. I quickly discovered that had I just knit up the lemon at this different gauge, but following the pattern to a T, this would have been even bigger, and I didn't want it to be ginormous. So I really was just kind of checking the pattern to see what is supposed to happen here, and then deciding, or even doing some math here and there on exactly how I would make that work for my own lemon numbers. So this is more of a reference than it is a direct replica, but it totally does get the point across. So I wound up using the 2 different needle sizes because I was doing magic loop, and I was just finding that this 10mm needle was probably still not even a big enough needle for the t-shirt yarn. And just with how stiff of fabric I was getting, I was just having the hardest time working the stitches at all. And so at some point I got smart and dropped the needle size on my left needle so that there was a lot of extra room around the stitches on that left needle. And so I had extra room to insert my right needle and work the stitches and then work them around. And I just was literally wrestling them every time I had to do the magic loop. If you know me, you know I don't even like magic loop to begin with. So to do it in this manner was difficult, but it got the job done. And I got to tell you, I had a blast wearing this at the wedding. I was able to put literally everything I own inside of here. So it was a fun little accessory to have. I think it'll be fun. I actually have like a fun purse collection from back in my younger days. I was a bit of a fun purse girl. I think Betsy Johnson, that was kind of my vibe. So I think it'll fit right in there. And honestly, it took 2 days to knit up. So it was a fun little thing to work on. And I don't know what else I would have done with the t-shirt yarn or even the chenille yarn. So I'm happy to have taken the time to knit this project, even though it was a little bit of a beast and it's sort of a random thing that I don't know I'll ever use again. I had fun making it. If one of my like little cousins or something wants this, they could have it. I don't care. So that was my lemon pouch. That's my tip for anyone who is working with yarn that is just difficult to knit through. And maybe you're having a hard time wrestling stitches. Try dropping down that needle so that you have extra room into the stitches that you're working into, if that makes sense. So let me give you a quick project breakdown for this lemon pouch. All right, so as I said, it's the Lemon Pouch by Yoon Jeong. Now, the pattern was $3.89, and just keep in mind that going forward, I really should kind of remove that price from this project since I had already factored it into the first time I knit it. I have to figure out how I'm notating that in my notes, but just keep that in mind that at some point that $3.89 is probably going to disappear. So it was indeed in my pattern library. It was not gifted. And the yarns that I used were a miscellaneous thrifted cotton t-shirt yarn, a miscellaneous thrifted chenille yarn, and then that Rico Design Creative Melange Chunky. The colorways respectively were yellowish, goldish, and then the Rico yarn was the color 006 green. So they were all in stash. None of them were gifted. And at full price, my guesstimation, the closest thing I could find to the t-shirt yarn was about $5.25 a ball. The closest thing to the chenille cone is about $30 for that thing. And then the Rico Design Melange goes for about $8.80. However, I paid about $1 for the t-shirt yarn, about $5 for the chenille cone, and then $1 for the Rico Design. And they were all thrifted. I tapped into just a single ball of each of them, but that does mean that had I gone out and sought out these yarns or similar on their own, the full price yarn total would be about $44.05, and my yarn total came to about $7. With no additional expenses, the full price project total, so that yarn plus the pattern would be about $47.94, and my total spent was about $10.89 for a project that was on my needles for 2 days. The cost per day would be about $5.45, which always seems silly when it works out that like this top would be less than the purse, but it's a novelty item, and sometimes you just gotta kind of roll with those punches to do something fun. And the reality is those yarns were just sitting in stash and I have no other plan for them. They're things that I actually purchased either a super long time ago or came in like another pack of yarn at the thrift store. So they had no other purpose. This was the perfect thing to work them up into, and I'm really happy with it. So that is my lemon pouch. All right, now let me give you the update on the project that has probably received the most attention since the last podcast, and that is going to be my Darling Cardigan by Veronica Lindberg, which I'm knitting out of KNC Cloud Paca. That's a blown yarn, and it's in this really fun bubblegummy pink color. I am able to put her onto Helena the Hang, so let me go ahead and do that for you. And here we have it. So I don't know how clear it will be, but the only thing I have left to do on this cardigan is knit up the button band. I've been working hard on this guy. It's actually just been such a fun, easy project, and it really does feel like such a brain break that I've been needing. And so I've really been happily just working away on this piece. It's also helpful that I am knitting mine particularly cropped. Not to mention the fact this has been knit up on a 5mm needle, so a pretty fun, quick knit. This is a drop shoulder V-neck cardigan. It is knit from the top down. You start with the back and come to the front, pick up stitches, knit to the underarm, work your way down to this ribbing, and then once that's complete, you come back and knit the sleeves. There's just a few decreases worked into there, and then again, this ribbing, and everything is finished with a Rook bind off. Now, I love this style of ribbing. Actually, when I was first looking at the pattern, I thought it was 2x2 rib, and then I realized it's 2x1 rib, and I feel like we don't utilize that enough. I love the look of that. I think because my purl stitches do wind up being kind of sloppy, doing a 2x2 rib can often wind up looking a little bit wonky, but the 2x1 just makes for this really like very full kind of detail look, and I just think I do prefer the look versus a 2x2 rib. And then the Rook bind off is something that I've done because I've actually knit one of Naringa Rook's patterns, her yoga winter sweater, and she uses the Rook bind off there. And I still, when I knit it then, I felt torn on it. I felt like I didn't love the look of it, but it was fine. And I kind of still feel that way. They say that it's supposed to give you this sort of rounded detail, and I see what they mean when they say that, and perhaps I'm just not doing it correctly, but I don't know that I'm obsessed with this edge. I see the allure of doing it. It creates for this kind of just nice stretchy edge. It doesn't have that look of a standard, knit over knit bind off, which sort of leaves you with like a crochet slip stitch edge. And I see why sometimes you wouldn't maybe want that look. And then the other options here would be to rearrange your stitches to do a tubular bind off, which can be fussy and doesn't always look quite right either. So I'm still torn on this Rook bind off. I think it's fine. And I also thought that with the blown yarn, it would be a good idea to just keep things nice and stretchy, because the blown yarn can be kind of tricky to bind off. You wind up sort of catching little bits of the chain that make up that tube. And so it can get a little bit tricky to wind up with a bind off that still has stretch to it. So I think it's fine here. And once this is blacked, I think all the little fuzzies will kind of conceal the edge anyway. So I don't think it matters. But the only thing that I wanted to note here is a very common thing for other people, and I've now experienced this too with the Veronica Lindbergh patterns, is that the amount of stitches I picked up for the sleeves was not what it was called for in the pattern. In fact, I have more stitches in my sleeves than even the largest size of the pattern calls for, and I don't know why that is. I think it could have to do with the fact that this is the drop shoulder, and so there's a good chance that my row gauge here or something is just wound up with a little bit of a deeper hole there than the pattern suggests. But the sleeves are fitting well. I should put this on real quick for you. But I just was like, why is this always the case? So I basically just tried to pick up the amount of stitches that it said for my size and knew right away that was not going to work out. And then I just settled on a rate of 2 out of 3 stitches I picked up, and I was happy with the way it looked on the first sleeve, wrote down that amount of stitches, and did it again on the second one. After that, I did follow the instructions to decrease. I wasn't sure if I was going to, because I definitely didn't want these to be like tapered sleeves, but you just work a few decreases underneath. I have them actually marked out here. So I figured, why the heck not? I went ahead and did that, and then finished off the cuff with the same amount of ribbing that I did on the hem here. All that's left to do is the double knit button band and then sew on buttons. So I don't see why this wouldn't be done in the next week or two. And I think it'll be perfect timing to wear this fall. This is what it's looking like on right now. And I think My only concern at the moment is the cropped length I knit it to. It's feeling particularly cropped in this moment. As I say that, I'm thinking that if I'm a better person, I should actually block it before doing the button band. I wasn't going to do that, but I chose the length that I did. I wanted a sweater that fit a little bit more boxy and a little bit shorter. So that was why I knitted to the length that I did, but I am just afraid that I maybe was a little bit too... I'm just nervous that I've maybe accounted for too much sort of growth and blocking. Being that this is an alpaca yarn, it should have a good bit of drape to it. We'll see. We'll see what I wind up doing. It's obviously not the worst thing in the world if I have to redo the button bands. But that would be my only concern at the moment, is that it might be a little short. Although then I'm sitting here and kind of tugging on it and it feels right. I don't know. We'll see what winds up happening. But the sleeves, I think, are so perfect. When those grow a little bit, they're already at a nice kind of cozy length. So I think that they will stay that way. And it's feeling really good. I think it looks so cute. I'm really loving the color. I'm glad you guys are too. And overall, this has just been a fun kind of palette cleanser knit. Super easy, super quick. As of today, it's been on my needles for just 28 days. So it's a really, really fun knit, and I'm excited to have it done and to be able to wear it. So we will see what this turns into in the next podcast. That's my darling cardigan by Veronica Lindberg. The final whip I'm going to talk about today will actually help us transition into some acquisitions, and it's just going to be a very quick update because it did not get too much love. But this is my Camisole number 7 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, which I am knitting out of Sandisgarn Tin Lena in the burgundy colorway. This shouldn't look too different from how it was in the last podcast episode, because I'm at this point where this project is just sort of frustrating. This camisole is knit from the top down, and I've started with a provisional cast on both the front and back for mine. So that's what all the tubing's about, because once it's done, I'm going to make sure that it's the right sort of depth and that these straps don't need to be shortened at all. So that's why it's like that. But basically where we're at right now is working on the decreases that sort of make the little V shape under the bust on this top. And I literally is probably why I'm actually knitting this. I think that that's just such a fun and kind of, if you will, sexy kind of look, which will make this nice for, you know, summer date nights and things, which is part of why also this isn't maybe the most exciting knit for me right now, because we're getting chilly in Connecticut, and literally as every day as it's getting colder, I'm like, why am I working on this at all? And I'm trying not to let myself think about that, especially while I get through the decreases. So that's really my biggest holdup right now, is that the decreases are worked in a way that is not making any sense to my brain. There's no rhyme or reason. There obviously is. It's just not computing for me or becoming at all intuitive. So for each decrease row, I am a slave to the pattern, and I'm sitting there like literally reading every stitch that you have to make up into the point you're decreasing and increasing to get this really pretty decorative look to it. And I think I maybe even need to just give myself a mission of doing one of these decrease, increase decorative rows a day or something, to ensure that I just don't fall off track. Basically, it's a series of 4 rows that are making up this decorative look, and you have to do those 4 rows a total of 9 times. And currently, I'm about to have finished the 3rd. Now, that wasn't part due to the fact that I didn't have the right tools to get this done. So this is officially on some new needles. That is part of the acquisitions that I've made. I was finding that my 3mm needles were just, none of them were quite right for this project. It was very Goldilocks. One cable was too long, one cable was too short, and I think we're on a cable now that is just right. So I have this now on a 32-inch cable, and I picked these up. These are the Addy Scassel Unicorn Turbo Standard Tip spiraling texture needle. So these are a 3mm needle on a fixed 32-inch cable, and they have this spiral on the needle themselves that's supposed to keep your stitches from slipping. I just picked them up not for that reason at all, because they were the right size. That was why I got them. The only thing is that the tip on them is a little bit blunt, and so with the splittiness I've been experiencing with this yarn too, it's just making these little increases and decreases so fussy. And so like all of this adds up to me not wanting to work on this project, but I am determined to get it done. I could at least wear this under a blazer or something, and I think it'd be so cute to finish out the fall. So I really do want to see this get done. I should set myself a daily goal of just getting that like 1 4-row repeat done every day, maybe with my coffee. Let's see if I can hold myself to that. So as of today, it's been on my needles for 36 days. And once I get through the decreases, it just turns into broken rib stitch. So I feel like I should just push through and get this one done. So that's my camisole number 7. So those are all the projects I've worked on since the last podcast. And obviously there was an acquisition built into there, and I have a good bit more in the way of acquisitions. So another local yarn shop is sadly going out of business. So I was able to make it over there in part of their closing sales. And to be honest, I'm just starting to really have that feeling like all of the yarn shops in Connecticut are closing. And I'm finding it to be very sad, especially as someone who really enjoys going into a yarn store and like touching, feeling yarn, seeing colors in person. That's just part of the experience for me. And so the last time a local yarn shop closed, they had their closing sales, and I was able to find some yarn at a good deal, but I really wouldn't let myself get too frivolous with it, because I just thought, okay, it's just on sale. Let's get the yarn that, what we know we'll use. And I've been working through that still. But this time I kind of felt like, you know what? If I see yarn and I'm interested in it and it's enough to make something out of, I'm going to just go ahead and grab it, because at least I'm seeing it in person and I know I like it. It is on sale, of course, so that's a plus too. But it's also just the fact of, I don't know how much access I'm going to have to yarn in person in the near future with so many of these yarn shops closing. Obviously, there was the Joann's closing as well. So all of this is just sort of compounding into me feeling like I have no more options for buying yarn in person. And to be honest, it led to some purchases that I'm wildly excited about, and I can't wait to share them with you. By the time this video comes out, the yarn barn will have already closed, but if you guys have been here since the beginning, this is the yarn shop that I purchased my infamous antler buttons at. I don't know who I think I am that I went into any store and was like, here's the card, charge it, baby. And I'm handing her the card because, and I'm like, $20, here we go. And she's like, oh yeah, that's gonna be $40. And I was like, $14. That is not bad. This is what I was expecting, $14. But then there was a part of me that was like, I think your brain's telling you it's 14. I don't think that was what she said. I checked the receipt and it was $42 for 4 buttons. I just looked at the button and I was like, yeah, that's a nice button. Like, that's exactly what I want for this cardigan. In the receipt, it says that I bought 4 antler buttons. So I guess that's kind of exciting for me. I don't know whose antler it is, but somebody's walking around without an antler. And it's on my cardigan. And it's also the first real yarn shop that I had gone into when I started knitting. And it was one of the only ones that I received a super warm welcome in. And I just, the mother-daughter who owned this yarn shop were so sweet every time I was there. And so I'm sad to see it go. But it was nice to go back in there and kind of say goodbye to them, say goodbye to the yarn shop. So let me show you what I picked up. Let's start with a bang. One of my favorite things about this yarn shop was their plentiful selection of Nora yarns. And I will say, sorry for the story time, but I had a little bit of a full circle moment because it was the first year that I started knitting, and for my birthday, my then boyfriend, now fiance, and we went on the Great Yarn Tour of Connecticut and literally stopped at every yarn shop up and down the coast of Connecticut. And and on that day, I was showing him just the price range and stuff of yarns. And I was like, that's the Nora. That's my dream yarn to work with. And I've already knit up my dream cardigan with my dream yarn. That's the sand cardigan in the Nora Madara. But I've also just long coveted this Nora yarn. I find it to just be really beautiful and it's luxurious to work with. And I was showing this purchase to him and he was like, isn't that your dream yarn? And I was like, it is. And it just kind of felt good to go back to this yarn shop that I now kind of have these memories with and purchase a good bit of Nora. And I don't know, there was just something kind of full circle about that. So this is the Nora Silk Garden, and this is 45% silk, 45% mohair, and 10% wool. These are little 50-gram balls with 100 meters per ball, and this is the colorway 84. I was able to find 7 of these, and this color is just my absolute favorite. It has a really beautiful combination of really rusty oranges and maybe even peachy tones, then going into kind of more mauvey browns, and then all the way through these hot pinks and fuchsias. So I have to see kind of how far I could stretch that, whether this will become a tank top, a t-shirt, or a sweater. I was just kind of purchasing things that I knew I could make into some sort of garment, as that is my preferred way of knitting. And so I didn't figure out what I want to knit this into. I'd be happy to hear your suggestions, but I have to figure out kind of how far I can stretch this yarn. Oh, there's also some really beautiful olive greens. This is just my favorite color combo ever. So I'm so excited to work with this. Another yarn that really caught my eye, all of this really was based on color, was this Ella Rae Classic Wool, Pure Virgin Wool. It says this is a 100-gram ball with 200 meters on it. It's color 90. And oh my gosh, I'm looking for the contents. It's 100% wool. Gorgeous Kelly green. I used to have a store-bought sweater in this color. I might have a photo of it somewhere. And I just adore this color. And I was shocked when I saw it that I don't actually have anything like this in my yarn stash, in my wardrobe as it is. I think that this, I'm torn on this becoming either a basic sweater or maybe a nice cardigan. I think it would just pop really nicely with some blue jeans. So I think this would be a really, really fun cardigan or sweater or something. Again, if you have suggestions, I'd love to know. I have 6 of these. The other Nora yarn I purchased was this Nora Silk Garden Sock Solo. And this is just a colorway that I've always seen at the store. And I'm like, man, love that. Don't know what I do with it, but I do love it. And so on sale, I figured why not? They did only have 3 balls of this, which as a garment knitter, I just decided to pick up anyway. I thought with the colorway that this is, I could knit this into really anything and get a lot of use out of it. So this one is 40% wool, 25% silk, 25% polyamide, and 10% mohair. Obviously, the name is Silk Garden Sock Solo, so I do believe that this is intended to be knit up into socks, but for that reason, I thought it would work super well for more accessories, maybe even like a matching set of mittens and a hat and things. This colorway is this really lovely grayish color. It's a very beigey gray, and then it has flecks of all of these different pastel neons. You have this stunning lavender, and in this strand here, it's paired up next to this really pretty pastel cobalt, if there's such a thing. And then there's these little neon yellows and greens, but then mint greens, as well as flecks of white and baby pinks. And then there's like a rusty orange color, as well as a more turquoise color. There's like a burgundy over here. It just has every fun color imaginable. So I thought that this would just be so fun. I definitely want to hear what you think I should make out of this yarn. And it just feels so special to own this, if I'm honest. And then finally, this was kind of my wild card choice, but since I've purchased these, they've been sitting over here waiting for me to film, and I keep walking past it and I'm like, I need to make that into something right now. And that is, first of all, this Ella Rae Classic 100% wool. This is 100 grams to 200 meters. So I guess very similar to the Ella Rae Classic. Oh, okay. So maybe this is the same exact thing and just in different packaging. Although this one you can see is maybe a little bit of a looser ply. Who knows if this is maybe just an older yarn that's kind of has had a little more life to it. But this is in the colorway 70. This really fun tangerine orange color. I love this color. I have a crocheted sweater in very similar color that I love so much. So I picked this up. There were 7 balls. I said, that's perfect. But then I saw this. And I'm new to the whole wool and mohair thing, and I have my own thoughts about it, and I never think it's a necessity, but I have to be honest, once in a while, it seems like a fun option. And I loved this sort of pumpkin-y color with that tangerine color. So this is a yarn that I've also seen at this yarn shop so many times, and I never would have purchased. Now, I also, I guess, assumed that this one was on sale, and it wasn't, according to my receipt. So is what it is. I'll be very happy to play with it. So this is the Rowan Kid Silk Haze. They're silk mohair, so it's 70% mohair, 30% silk. This is the, I don't know if it says the colorway. It says SH. I'll see if I can find the colorway. It's orange. And then it's a 25-gram ball to the 210 meters. So they only had 5 of these. And as someone who doesn't normally work with the whole mohair wool thing, I really had no idea what I was looking for. And without a pattern in mind, I actually really lucked out that the people in the store, they were laughing at me. I had gone in with this rule for myself that I could only carry out what I could carry in my own hands. And so as you might be able to tell, my arms were quite full. And I had all of this yarn. And then I saw this closer to the checkout, and I was trying to compute how much of it I might need for a sweater's quantity. And the absolute lovely women who were laughing with me and my arms full of yarn, they were so nice in helping me figure that out. And we were like doing the math together. Literally, these people were so sweet. I wish that I got their names or numbers. If you were in that checkout line with me and you want to be friends, please reach out and let me know, because I just thought that was it was like the yarniest girlhood moment there ever was, trying to figure out how much mohair I would need. And they had more experience with mohair and yarn, so they could kind of give me a guesstimate of what I should aim for. And so for a second, I almost didn't get it because there were only the 5 balls to my 7 balls of wool. But I just said, you know what? Let's go for it. If I can make this work together, I would love to. I think it'd be really fun. And if not, I can always use this on a different project or something. But considering the circumstances, I just said, why not? And I'm so glad, because I think that this combo would make for a really great, just basic sweater. I think that that little bit of the melange that it would give would be really, really fun. And I think something kind of sweatshirty, classic sweater in this fun, bright, fuzzy luxe yarn combo, I'm here for it. And to be honest, I don't have enough plans to knit basic sweaters. So I think that this is going to really work out for me in the end, and I might wind up casting it on sooner than later. Ugh. something got my nose at some point there. But those are all of the yarns that I picked up at the yarn shop, plus the needles. And the yarns, with the exception of the Rowan one, were 40% off. So like I said, it was kind of hard to say no. And really, truly, there's nothing in my stash like these, so I'm so thrilled. That being said, I do feel as though I need to organize and maybe clear out some yarn from my stash that's from my pre-knitting days. That's just taking up, I think, some unnecessary space. But would you guys be interested in an updated stash tour video, or even trying to see how I get this all reorganized? I think I've come up with a system, but I have to go through that phase of kind of taking everything out to put it all back. Let me know if you'd want to see that. If not, I will just do that in my spare time. But I'm really excited to add these to my stash. Please let me know what you think about what I should make these things into. With those vibes I've provided for you. And with that, you guys, I think that is everything. If you did enjoy this video, the easiest way that you can let me know is just by giving it a thumbs up. And then if you want to stick around for more content like this or anything else we might come up with yarny related in the future, then I would definitely recommend you go ahead and subscribe. And don't forget to ring the bell so that you're notified anytime I post a new video. However, you can usually expect a weekly Saturday morning upload at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. With that, a big ol' thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye.